This is Jeremy Wentworth-Stanley. I'm the fellow who has a hyphen in my name. The hyphen is silent, but I am anything but that. This is a new series of Respectonomics. It follows the completion of the multi-part series of called the Kleenex Factor series. The Kleenex Factor series likened an organization, a corporation, or a political entity to a human body, and looking at the human body to see how the various parts colluded with one another and how information flows through the body, and of course dealt with what happens when that information does not flow through authentically and cleanly. We're now entering a new series. This living asset series we should always emphasize the living asset series has always been involved and consistently involved with dignifying the human being and looking at frankly, the amazing potential and the capacity to adapt and to reinvent. We believe that these jewels, these strengths, these talents have been suppressed, and our job now is to bring them back into the open and into focus. My name is Jeremy Wentworth-Stanley. I am your voice of Respectonomics, and this new series is called the Four Horsemen of Business. The Four Horsemen of Business. You will already probably have picked up that the tone has changed. We have done possibly a U-turn. The series, the 160, 170 podcasts that we have to date, have all basically been designed around the idea of how we can dignify the human being and how the concept of dignifying is bringing out the worth of the individual. The sad comment is this: people across the board, if you will, have gleefully and interestedly, they have risen to this message. They believe it. They believe in the concept of giving people their worth. What is alarming is that we have not had that kind of response from what I would commonly call the business leaders. So whether it's business, whether it's corporate, whether it's political, but people in those layers of leadership have not shown significant interest or pickup in this particular purpose. This is a frightening, this is a frightening indictment, because the truth of the matter is the world is in a precipitous position at the moment. And at the moment, we are doing things that are probably going to lead us into some very, very serious economic issues. We talk about recession as a word to be frightened of. Recession is probably a fairly placid way of describing what really could be coming down the line. We're talking about here where there has been tremendous destruction of standards, of education, of way in which we conduct our businesses, our expectations. The list goes on. And the result has been that we are seeing a great deal of unhappiness in the workforce, unhappiness in communities, unhappiness in families. There's a great deal of upset in the world today. And we need to look at the responsibility that leadership has to that very configuration. I'll remind you, it was Ronald Reagan, the late Ronald Reagan, the President of the United States, who made this comment. He said, "The greatest leader is not necessarily the one who does the greatest things. He is the one that gets the people to do the greatest things." We live in a world today where we need people to be able to do the greatest things, where they feel confident, empowered, enabled, encouraged, supported to do these greatest things. So let's take a look at this new series now called the Four Horsemen of Business. And there are four horses, if you will, in play. These are words, there's one word that exists already. The other three have been blended together. The first one is peristocracy. The next one is cratocracy. Then we have amathiocracy and auremocracy. And you might already be saying, what on the earth are these titles, these names of the horses, the horsemen, all about? So let's have a look. Peristocracy is the power, because we talk about democracy, the power of the people. Peristocracy is the power of the parasite. And the parasite is the one that sucks on the organization, takes out, extracts whatever it can, and then leaves the site, recognizing that parasites will always ultimately demolish the host. Then there's cratocracy. Cratocracy is the horseman that loves power for the sake of power. Kratos is the Greek for power, and cratocracy is the love of power, the power that seems to be empowering in and of itself. Amathiocracy is a word that you are actually familiar with because the math part of it is where we get the word mathematics from the word mathema, which means to learn. Amathiocracy means the power that is endemic when people are no longer willing to learn. Let me put it more crudely. It's when people thrive on ignorance and believe that their power is made all the more by not having to pay attention to the issues that are surrounding them, and not only paying attention to these issues, but also not learning from them and acting on them. And finally, there's auremocracy. Auremocracy depends a little on how you pronounce the word aurum, whether you pronounce it aurum or aurum, but that is the Latin for gold. And that is the power that's in leadership that is only interested in self-emolument. In other words, gaining as much money for themselves as possible. That evidence is in the separation today between the proverbial lowest worker and the highest paid executive. It used to be a difference 25 years ago or so. It was a difference of 17 times. It's now running into the hundreds, 400, 600, and even beyond that times that the proverbial management, senior executives will extract from a corporation in terms of compensation. So there we have these four horsemen. And let's talk about the four horsemen of business for a moment. Let's think about the origin of these four horsemen was that they would be the harbingers, they would be the ones that would be sounding forth famine, plagues, chaos, and death. And in corporate worldese, we would probably say expiration dates. But we're talking about a chaotic situation in the world that is evolving at the moment. Our messages, our Respectonomics messages, have always tried to be timeless. And in this particular case, the timelessness is getting infected, if you will, by current events. I will therefore talk about current events and talk about the great separations that are occurring in major nations these days. Separations not only financially that we just talked about, but separations that are there politically, so excuse me, separations that are occurring socially, and separations that are taking place in terms of people's skills and talents. These separations are hardly the words of the standards of leadership, or excuse me, of collaboration and joining together to common causes. Put more bluntly, it defies the issue of community. It may be that anybody who is one of these horsemen, maybe somebody is actually one or two horsemen or three horsemen or four horsemen. But whatever that role is that the individual leadership has, he or she whether it's civil, whether it's political, whether it's corporate, whether it's business, whether it's organizational, take a look at that as these foundational blocks are falling apart in the way in which we conduct trade, relationships with one another, we can identify one another. As these parts start falling apart, we then run the risk of a complete turnaround in our social living. Turnaround is a little bit of a polite euphemism, a mild way of saying, could we be looking at a revolution where people basically stand up and say, we're not taking this anymore? Was there not a movie where the individual said, I'm so mad and I'm not taking it anymore? I think it was Peter Finch. The point of the story is that if people get to that point where they feel that they are so excluded and so marginalized, so left behind, that they find out that they have to take extraordinary actions to get attention. And again, the Four Horsemen may say, I can ride off into the sunset. To a point that may be true. But there's not much point running off into the sunset if one finds that one's wealth has been demolished. And also another thing, I do not know of a single human being with all the wealth and all the trappings that still wants to be included. We talk about inclusiveness, but what we're really talking about is people want to feel and believe that there is a sense of respect, a sense of community, a sense of backing, a sense of identity. Because once those have been taken away, all the wealth will mean nothing. The classic comment has been, true wealth is what you cannot buy with money. Therefore, if you have all the wealth and all the trappings and all the power, and they are taken away, then of course all you're left with is the reputation. And reputational risk is an enormous problem for people who are looked upon sneeringly, possibly legally, but possibly and more importantly, in the sense that they are isolated from any real communication. It has been said that the cruelest thing one can ever do to a human being is to put them into solitary confinement. That concept of rejection, that concept of abandonment is very powerful. And when people no longer want to know you or want to know me, when they feel that we were the authors of these plagues and these pestilence and the chaos, when people believe that, that's hardly a reputation that one would want to say, oh yes, I'm ready to defend that. This message, as you can tell, is powerful. It's strident. It's basically saying that we have been given many warning signals. History is full of warning signals. And we tend to think if the warning signal doesn't come from a particular source, then maybe it's not valid. That, of course, is a fallacy in itself. A warning signal can be a leaf that's falling off a tree. It can be a very small, what appears to be minor. But as Sherlock Holmes said, the important thing is the smallest details. So when we look at the smallest details, when we find that people, it's hardly a small detail to say that people are feeling hopeless, but when you hear words like hopeless, when you hear lines like they do not care, when you hear lines like I am not, nobody wants to know who I am, when you hear of these massive layoffs that are not done with a personal reconciliation or a personal involvement, but are done through electronic digital media, when all of these things are being done, when people are existing in a state of fear, when people look at AI and wonder, what does it mean? Is it a tool? Is it a servant? Or is it a master or a mistress? We don't really know yet, but it is very frightening. And people are looking for a sense of being wrapped around and being brought along and being included in the new world and the new decisions. The time of ignoring these warnings is over. The time is now upon us to recognize that the very structures of society are crumbling at the base. And as those crumbles take place, and this is not alarmist, this is literally rolling out what in fact people feel. Excuse me. If you, excuse me again, if you talk to people today, what you nearly always hear is a concern, a worry, an anxiety, a frustration. It might be with their own lives. It might be with their own spending capacity. It might be with their level of debt. It might be with their level of political engagement. We have a situation today around the world where the proverbial politician, that elected individual, is dealing with the ultimate conflict of interest. Does he or she pay attention to the voter, the individual, or does he or she pay attention to the party? Because the two can quite often, and you often are, in conflict with one another. So we're dealing with issues that are, frankly, they're enormous. They probably deal with accountability. They deal with capacity building. They deal with delegation, huge issues that have been either ignored or suppressed. And one of the problems we've come up with, we talk about this word of a matheocracy, the one that doesn't want to learn. It's also the one that pushes people away. It says, no, you're not going to be part of our group. And if you look at all the if you look at the revolutions that have taken place in history, the French Revolution, the Russian Revolution, the Chinese Revolution, each one had one denominator, and that was the unwillingness of the senior organization, the leadership, to allow other people into their sandbox. So when we find that we are being excluded, this is a time, this is a recognition of the tremendous dangers and risks that we could be encountering. We look at oromocracy, this business of where the leadership wants the gold, it wants the money. The truth of the matter is, of course, people should be paid for what they do. Capitalism is very good at saying that if somebody has taken a risk, they should be paid. But what you're finding is that the risks are not risks. They have become a sense of entitlement. They have become people saying, yes, I'm in this role, therefore I shall be paid this amount of money. The truth of the matter is the risk is being taken by the people, and the leadership is the one that is reaping the benefit. And when the benefit is not available, there is a lack of accountability, and the cost of that failed risk is then dealt back onto the people. This kind of rollout can almost sound socialistic, communistic, and so on. It is nothing of the sort. It is to do with the fact that there are two threads in life. There's the socialism and there's capitalism. And they both perform extraordinarily important functions that each depend on one another. The socialist needs the capitalist needs the socialist. But the truth again is that if these two are going to coexist, they cannot be out of balance with one another. And if capitalism means that people are exercising the horsemanship skills of paristocracy, of amatheocracy, cratocracy, and oromocracy, it's fairly obvious, to use the word obvious, it is obvious that they are riding in the wrong direction. We need to take this message to the corporate and political leaders. This is no longer a Boy Scout movement where wouldn't it be nice? We're talking about some realities. We're talking about some very harsh realities. There's a new word that may come back into vogue, a word that you and I have not heard for many, many years, and it is the word sacrifice. Another word we haven't heard for a long time is servant. And that is that leadership is defined by its ability to serve the people, to serve the organization, to serve the community. And when the concept of service is considered expendable and that power becomes the way to exercise service, then we will find ourselves moving in the wrong, unsustainable directions. This is a plea, this is a rollout, this is what would you call it? An expose of saying, we know we have these feelings. We know. I can give you one example. I had an uncle, a great uncle, who was determined, who was diagnosed with terminal cancer. And the doctor said to him, I'm sorry, the news is not good, and that is that you have this inoperable cancer. To which he replied, I am an engineer, and I know when the engine isn't ticking over properly. It's an old-fashioned expression to talk about a ticking over engine. But each of us knows today that the engine is not ticking over properly. And it's time to take ourselves back into the mechanic's bay. It's time to overhaul the engine. It's time to say to the political leaders, we want you to be servants of the community and of the nation. It's time to go to the leaders in business and to have them ask two questions of all the people in whom they encounter, whether they are at the senior level, whether at the junior level, whether they're at the front line, wherever the individuals of that corporation are, two questions need to be asked by the leadership. And the first one is to draw alongside and to ask one question: how is your day going? How is your day going? What a fundamental question to ask of one human being to another, because that comment that comes back will be the one that helps us to understand what it is that those people, whoever they might be, senior or junior, what they're encountering. And the other question is, are we on the right track? Sam Walton, the original founder of Walmart, one of his great lines was to draw everybody together and ask one question. He would say to them, we know what we're doing right because the numbers tell us that. Tell us what we're doing wrong. And that allowed people to come forward and say that this was happening or that was happening. But look what Sam Walton did. He was in the business of listening. He was not an theocratic. He was somebody who wanted to learn. And by learning, he would then take the necessary actions. We also need to be able to say to one another, not necessarily even in the corporate world or the business world, the political world, but in a community that's made up of lives, made up of villages, made up of families, made up of social connections, service clubs, faith organizations, right across the board. There is one question that we can all ask, and I'm asking it today. My name is Jeremy Wentworth-Stanley. I'm standing in front of the jury, and I'm going to ask you one question. What can I do to lighten your load? As an address to the jury on that point, I rest my case.